Here again today for Seinu Gardens. Today I'm just going to show you all the plants in my nursery. So here I got a red maple, really big one. It's in the ground. It's actually inside a 3-gallon pot, I think, which is then further planted in the ground, and it just grew through the drainage holes of that. As is the same for these two as well. And then I have behind those a collected cork bark elm. This is actually native to North Carolina. And over here I have a Carolina hornbeam, which I'm not sure the current condition of as far as the main trunk, but it is alive at the base. And then over here you can kind of see all my tables and stuff. As we get closer, this is my Toigawa juniper. Still not finished. Down here we have a boxwood. I cannot remember the exact variety. It is not a Kingsville, but I do not recall the variety off the top of my head. But it is related to Kingsville though, just not actually Kingsville. And here we have a Japanese maple forest planting, which when I had planted it, it eventually died on this side. I'm probably going to pull these plants up at some point and plant them individually and start a new forest. Over here we have a really nice forest planting that I really like. Actually, you're looking at the back of it right now. It's nothing but elms. And I'm considering taking it apart and planting the trees individually and redoing the forest planting with all, like, more with a heavier planting with all the trees that I have that I've planted over the past couple of years that are growing out, like my oaks and stuff, and doing like a mixed planting of, I know, oaks, probably some elms. If I can get some Carolina hornbeams that are suitable for a forest planting. I actually really like the naturalistic feel of the surface of the soil, where it has the grass and all that, where I keep that all pruned very well. But generally I let it just grow naturally, like just let weeds grow through just naturally. But I keep it pruned though, so it doesn't take over the planting. Actually, there's the one that really kind of starting to grow. But yeah, I keep it pruned. As you can see, it's kind of freshly pruned a little bit. Over here we have a little grass that I'm probably going to remove eventually, even if I leave this planting as is, and divide it so I can replant it as smaller, probably about that much, back in the same place it is, or maybe even split it up throughout the planting, as it's actually starting to get too big for this planting and it'll probably take over at some point. But actually you're looking at the back of it, and behind that is actually my stepdad's trailer, but so I can't really get on the other side. Right here is one of my boxwoods. It actually came from a cutting of a roughly 15-year-old boxwood that has finally passed away, sadly. It had already looked bad at one point several years ago. It looked like it was recovering, but it actually didn't. And over here is the boxwood in question. This produced a lot of baby plants. I actually, over the summer, I think like 2 years ago, it dried out really bad. It did not seem to kill it at the time, but it seemed to have damaged it heavily. But the leaves were kind of a little bit like this one, but a little bit more brown in it, but they still had some green in it, kind of like this one actually, more. But it looked like it was going to make it, but over the years, it's turned out that it probably won't, especially in its current condition, sadly. And then right here we have a Chinese elm seedling that I bought a few years, like, I think about, maybe it was last year, I think, during the spring, from, I do not remember the name off the top of my head, but I think it's Kade bonsai, like, which is like the Japanese word for maple bonsai, if I remember correct. But I cannot remember the owner's name of it, for the nursery's owner's name for the life of me. But he usually comes to the Triangle Bone Society in the spring and I think February, and sell seedlings, and also gives a regular talk. So there is that. And it's growing healthy. It's actually started dying back a little bit. I've actually moved into an apartment, so my plants are actually at my parents' house, and my mom's actually taking care of them. So they're not doing as good as they probably would have if I had room for them, which sucks. But for the most part, they're doing decently well. Over here we have a decently old red maple that has also had died back. We have this right here, which I think, I can't remember the common name, but I think it's Eleganus or something. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's Eleganus something. I got it as a bare root seedling a long time ago, but I've never actually taken it out of this pot and transplanted it. This is what it's always been in. And then right here we have a flat full of 2-year-old red maple seedlings. And behind that we have a big pot that I planted a whole bunch of cuttings in a long time ago, and only really these 2 boxwoods survived. But after actually weeding it and putting it over here and giving them some room to grow, they've actually started growing. Behind that is my biggest boxwood that I currently own, this is actually one that I'm planning on growing out and plus putting in the ground. And then over here is a Japanese yew, if I remember correct. This has actually been fairly well taken care of, but due to how I water my plants and take care of my plants and the soil that it has, it dries out so quickly during the summer that I would have to water it like several times a day on some occasions, and that's really just caused the roots to dry out over time to the point that they've died. And I mean, I think this is one of the plants I can maybe take some cuttings off of to plant it, but it's probably going to die eventually. And right here we have a whole bunch of cuttings. I think these are all trident maples except for that one right there, which is a Japanese maple. And then we have over here a whole bunch of cuttings of another plant. I'm not sure what it is. I think it is either Japanese or Chinese privet, but I'm not 100% sure on that. As well as a whole bunch of Itoigawa junipers, and then another container full of Itoigawa junipers, and another one. So yeah, I actually got a lot of cuttings. And then this one has these 2 Itoigawa juniper cuttings and a few Japanese maple cuttings. This is filled with the cuttings off of the boxwood that I showed earlier with the cork bark. As you can see right here with the small leaves that I said was similar to Kingsville, but isn't. I actually had a surprisingly low success rate on this, but it is what it is. And I'll just do a quick sweep over all of this. This is mostly seedlings that have popped up in the pots, except for maybe this maple right here and this maple. But they're all just seedlings that I haven't really done a whole lot with. And then behind these, a little bit hidden, is 3 Satsuki azaleas. I'm not sure the variety, but they do have white flowers with pink lines in them, and I think occasionally some really almost pink flowers with a lot of gazetta marks. There's a flower right here that I can show you, which is that right there. That's actually a dead flower, but they've already flowered. But I have 3 azaleas right there. I have this maple, which I think is dead. Looking at it, being in the back right here, it may have just been missed as far as watering, possibly, just because it's so far back. Next to that is another elm, and then I think Carolina hornbeam, which again has some dead growth on it. As you can see, most of what its new growth is, but it's still alive, as you can see on the buds. If I'm planning on actually taking some cuttings off of it, especially if it is an actual Carolina hornbeam, so I can I actually have some from my forest planting that I talked about earlier in this video. And then in this pot we have a formerly alive boxwood and a few elm trees that popped up in it. And here we have some Satsuki azalea cuttings, same as the ones that I just shown. Boxwood actually is, I mean, all of my boxwoods that I own, except for the cork bark one that I showed earlier, and the cuttings in the yellow pot right here, all came off of that original one in the white pot that has died. They're all babies of that plant, all of them. And then we have another elm, and then here I have no clue what this is, but I have used it as an experiment of some pruning methods, which has actually turned out very effective, which I might consider as a regular process. Sorry, put my hand in front of the camera, but it's a regular process for a lot of my seedlings, which is basically, this trunk was probably, considering how long I've had it, probably closer to 3 years, and then this is the 4th year growth. I pruned it really hard to about 6 inches, and then on the branches I pruned those back really hard as well, and that will be done yearly in the spring, just as new growth is starting, or before it's starting, like late winter, before the growth actually, like the buds are actually popping. Let me see if I can find an example on one of my plants that have lost growth, but let me see. Like this right here would probably be too far down, but where it's just turning green on the bud before it actually pops out is about the time I might start printing my seedlings in regards to this method I'm using on this, which is actually taking from Bonsai Masterclass, I think it's the name of the book, by Peter Chan, and it's listed under, I forget the chapter title, but it's actually one of my favorite books, especially by Peter Chan. I actually really like Peter Chan's books. I hate that they generally have like specific topics that I'm interested in, and the rest of the book I don't like, but those topics that they have